John Rexroad here from MassForCitizens.com, and I wanted to take a moment to share some stories and tell you a little bit of background behind Mass for Citizens. It's a personal journey for me, as it is a personal journey for everybody else through this new time of COVID-19. My story that brought me to this point goes a little further back, and I know it's been shared in part, but I thought I'd share it in a little bit more detail in answering questions as where I come from and what we're doing. So I'm going to share a few stories with you now. The story of Mass for Citizens and my journey that led me to this point actually started when I was young. My father was a lot like I am today. He was very moral. He had a very open heart. He was a kind man. He taught me the value of giving. My father was a lot like me in that if he saw somebody in need, he would take his jacket off and, with leaving them their dignity and respect, hand it to them or even put it on them. It was just natural for him, and it's natural for me to do. So that's sort of the early story. Another part of the journey is I started in business young. It was just always a drive I had. 8 years old, I was shining shoes outside of a barber shop. I didn't need to. I didn't need the money. My parents always had a nice home for us. We had everything we could want. But something about me wanted to make some of my own money. And it's also where I learned the harsh sides of business. I did in front of a barber shop, and on 2 barber shops, their sons came in and took over the business and asked me to leave. My first national business really started when I was in junior high. I think I was in 7th or 8th grade. I made plant boxes at home, and I also made clocks, and I advertised them nationally, and I sold them. So that's where I learned sort of the fundamentals of how to produce an ad and how to deal with people. Again, I brought those same foundations that I bring to my life today, which is always do right by others, make things of quality, and be fair and reasonable. My sister's 5 years younger than me, and my father worked late. My father was a driver salesman for Orwheat. It's Arnold's on the East Coast. My mother worked in a cashier at a grocery store. When my father came home after 5, most of the kids had already paired up, and I would go work in the shop with my father or do something else. So I really didn't do sports, and my focus has always been on doing things for others and taking care of others and having responsibility from a young age. People can do the math as far as the later part of my life. I'm 61 now. My wife is going to be turning 74 in July. And we've been married for, I say married, we've been together for 42 years. We did live together in sin, as some people would like to call it, for a couple of years, as I begged her to marry me. But for me, it was the same as marriage, and it was the same as that same commitment, so I count them. I married my best friend, and I was very fortunate to marry my best friend, and she remains my best friend. I grew up in Redondo Beach, California, a couple blocks from the beach. My wife and I owned a home there. And when we decided to move, we decided we wanted to come to a place that was a little less populated to raise a family. We took a map of the United States. We marked off the states that we would like to live in. My wife being from the Midwest, we had Wisconsin in there, we had Iowa, we had all of New England, because we like art, we like antiques, and we like those things. And then I went on a job search, and we moved here. We rented our home out. We loaded our 3 dogs and a cat in the back of our semi-station wagon. It wasn't really a both size. And we drove across the United States. We arrived in Connecticut. We didn't have a place to live. We hadn't rented a house yet. We lived in a motor lodge on the Turnpike in Connecticut. And we found a house. And I've always fixed up houses and redone them. So as I fixed them up and the rent went up, we moved to another one and fixed it up. We wanted to discover what area we wanted to live in. So when we decided to buy our first house, we ended up in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and we had I'll call it a fixer-upper. It needed things like the driveway was a pond, so I needed to put in a drain system, a French drain, and I rented the ditch witch to dig the trench, and I had the gravel sitting there, and I had to get a bobcat to put the gravel in, and with our budget, we couldn't afford to have either of them go over. We picked up the ditch witch Friday night. Friday I had until the time the rental place closed to be there before that to pick up the bobcat to use the next day to return it early Monday morning. So I understand grassroots of doing things. After the house in Old Saybrook, we bought a house in Lyme, Connecticut, and it was a center chimney colonial from 1690, and another fixer-upper, but this time it was a pure fixer-upper. When we bought it, they had started to dig a pond in the backyard, and the pond, they had just taken the topsoil. The agreement was they'd finish digging the pond, and I fixed up the house by repairing the original lath and plaster, following everything to the final detail and storing it historically correct. While we were living in the house in Lyme, my wife and daughter became interested in horses. It had been a lifelong passion of my wife's. So we were spending all of our time at the stables. We had 5 acres in Lyme, and we wanted to bring the horses home. And because of the pond and the stream, we were receiving a little bit of, I'll call it harassing because it was, from the wetlands about the horses coming home. That's when I decided that I could fix the house, but I couldn't fix the land. From there, we went to the house we live in today, which is in Killingworth, Connecticut. It's a beautiful place. I told my wife, don't show me anything with less than 25 acres, and that she didn't. She brought me to this Cape house that we have today that she said, everything's perfect, we need to do nothing. Well, yeah, that's sort of true, I guess, if you don't mind construction made out of stacked 2x4s and chicken coops added to the house and structural issues. Because of the things I've learned that were passed down from generations from my grandfather and my father, and then learned in more detail by me, we're able to have nicer things. So over the years, I've done everything, including building the cabinetry, laying new floors, everything historically accurate. When we bought the house in Killingworth, Connecticut, it was the same time that I just started the company. At the time, it was Leading Edge Safety Systems. The company started very simply. I was in a small 2-room office area. My production area was literally a 1-car garage, and part of my manufacturing area was the back of a stockade fence. And from that, we ended up expanding into a larger area that was now a 3-car garage and the 1-car garage and the little office area. And as things progressed along the first couple years, I realized I needed a larger area. And that's when I moved to Deep River, Connecticut, and that was 12,500 square feet. We remained in operation in that space until I moved to the building that I'm in now, which is now 45,000 square feet in Madison, Connecticut, and gives us abundant space to be able to do Mass for Citizens. By my taking actions ahead of time, we're prepared to be able to do things like this. And it comes from my foundation to help people, and that's what the mission of Mass for Citizens is. In that vision, I also wanted to be a place where families could come, employees could work, and what they took back to their families and their communities. Through the vehicle of the company, we made people better, and we excelled them by providing a place that they could grow. I've always been Made America, and I've remained Made America to this day. Through the course of business, I've been fortunate enough to be able to write standards and regulations and do a lot of analysis on products, which is my technical side. New York local law for protection of public, that was a standards committee I sat on. I remember the day very well that the 4x4 came off the building in New York and killed a pedestrian. I actually was sitting in Yale New Haven Hospital. My daughter was 4. She had just come out of open heart surgery. My wife and I were sitting there, and we had the TV on. They announced that the 4x4 came off the building. My wife looked at me and she said, "You need to go to New York, don't you?" And I said, "I really should." I went to New York every day, and I worked on writing the standards. I worked on figuring out a solution. The solution that the city wanted was not a practical solution for the contractors. They wanted to put a perimeter net system, which would be very costly, every 6 floors on the building. It was something that needed innovation, and that's when I invented the orange vertical net that you may see in a lot of the buildings. And I suggested that. So it went from having a massive amount of costly systems that would interfere with construction to a simple product that was designed to be able to solve a problem. And that's what we are, a visionary company, visionary people, and that even goes into our manufacturing. Starting out when you're in a 1-car garage and then a 2-car garage and a stockade fence as your manufacturing areas, you learn how to be efficient. You learn how to solve problems. Even when I moved to the 12,000 square foot building, I needed to use ingenuity and use practicality of space. So we produced a Walmart order out of that building that produced all the nets for Walmart use across the nation. We did it in a record period of time. We set up shipping logistics. So really, we did a more massive project than what I'm doing with Masks for Citizens. Through the years, we've done a lot of exciting projects like NASA, the Mars Explorer, great bridge projects. I've been probably on every bridge in the United States that is older. We did the Capitol Rotunda. The design for both the art and the system on the Washington Monument came from our office. We have dozens of patents, and we have them because we're innovative. The role of the company is to protect people, pass on what we've been able to benefit from. And I started Masks for Citizens primarily to bring my people back to work. That was my first and foremost consideration. How can I bring these loyal people back to work? And how can I start serving a role in America to put people back to work? Because being back to work is going to be the best medicine for people to be able to relieve their stress. Because of the projects we were doing, we were a vital and necessary company. We couldn't shut our doors down and stop a project at NASA or stop a distribution center at FedEx or not be providing safety to the construction industry. We need to be working with the amusement industry as they're forward thinking. I needed to be working with ASTM and other standards bodies to make sure that we were developing regulations. One question I'm frequently asked is, where did the name Pucuda come from? And it's actually my wife's nickname. She's not a big fan of me sharing that. I was looking for a generic name because we were doing so many other areas. We were in construction, we were in amusement, we were in industrial, and we were in government projects. And I wanted a name that I could trademark as I had leading edge safety systems. I thought I'd use something generic like LEI or, a lot of different sort of short names. And it would turn up that one company in a sector was using it and it wasn't really trademarkable. After about 3 or 4 name tries, my patent attorney said to me, well, why don't you use your wife's nickname? It's unique and nobody will forget it. And it's sure got a great story behind it. So I decided to use the Pucuda. My wife is half Winnie the Pooh and she's half Barracuda. Maybe a lot of wives are half Winnie the Pooh and half Barracuda. I've only seen the Barracuda side really come out a couple times. As any husband probably knows, it's not a side you want to bring out. For the business, it really fit well too, because we do amusement. And amusement is really a soft side. It's a gentler side of the business. And the Barracuda side has a side to the company as well, because we make very durable products. We make products to last. We're tenacious at making sure that we deliver high service, that we take care of our customers, and that we work at solving their problems. So Pucuda came the name, and over time we answered the phone as Pucuda-Leading Edge, so we just ended up hyphenating it, so now we're today Pucuda-Leading Edge. I can't leave out the story that really brought us to where we are, really more of the story that's getting shared through the media of what happened in 2017. And it really started in 2009. In 2009, my father died. And that's where I learned another lesson. I was traveling back from an appointment in Seattle, Washington. And I'd just gotten on the airplane. I always fly Southwest Airlines. And I sat down, and for some reason, the voicemail came through on my phone. I had 2. The first one I listened to was my mother, and she said, "John, you need to call me right away." I knew it didn't sound very good. I listened to the second voicemail, and it was my wife. And she said, "John, it's very important you call me right away, please." So I picked up my phone and I called my wife first, and she informed me that my father had just died that night in his sleep. I looked at the flight attendant getting ready to secure the cabin, and I said, "I'm flying through Las Vegas. Is there any chance I can get my bag in Las Vegas? My father just died." She said she'd see what she could do. The flight took off. On our way to Las Vegas, after they reached cruising altitude, the stewardess came back to me and she said, "Your bag will be available for you at LAX. We booked you on a flight to LA, and the pilot has made all the arrangements by calling ahead to the airport." When the plane landed, they asked everybody to remain seated so I could get off the flight, which surprised me a little bit. When I walked off the flight, there was a crew sitting there waiting for me. And that crew escorted me to my flight, which they delayed so I could get on that flight to LA. That, among other experiences, like my experience with Southwest Airlines, showed me that a company can be profitable and have a big heart. They can take care of their employees. And that's reflected through their employees. That's the number one thing that I've always taken away from my experiences with Southwest and other companies, is that it comes from your employees and it comes from the owners and the managers' hearts. When I arrived in California, my mother was not doing well at all. My father had been compensating for her. She actually had, her leg was needed to be amputated, and she was fighting it. She was taking pain medications, but it was apparent that she was fighting it. Because of the infections, her mental capacity was severely diminished, and I ended up needing to carry the load. Among those were arranging for the funeral and making sure my mother was taken care of. We would be able to make the decisions that would work for everybody. So I looked at retirement homes and elderly care facilities and everything else, as the doctors were also working to handle her health issues. Eventually she did end up having her leg amputated, and eventually after some time her thinking became clearer and clearer. She ended up living the rest of her life out in the home. But during that course of time, I ended up spending about 5 months in and out of California, with the majority of time in California. Just before Christmas of 2016, my mother died. I went to California again that January, and I made the arrangements for handling the estate, for what to do with the house. The house we were left was the house we'd grown up in. I'd grown up in it since I was 3, and my sister had spent her entire life in that house. It was a hard thing to leave. At first we thought we would rent it, and then I decided that being from Connecticut, I could not be responsible for that weight. We decided to sell it. It was very important to my sister and I that another family be able to experience what we experienced in that home. It was a great place to grow up, but I put my resourcefulness to work and said, I want somebody to be able to raise a family like we were raised in it. And there's no reason they shouldn't be able to. It's a safe home, it's a beautiful home, it's a perfect place to be. But it was totally 1970s. Anybody that grew up in the 70s can know what I'm talking about. Paneling and gold carpeting, and it just needed some updating. So we decided to put some money into it and to remodel it. And I oversaw the remodel. I'd done it before. And we changed it totally to an open concept home. We put in hardwood floors. We put in new appliances, new cabinets. I put in tile walkways, big walk-in shower with a heated shaving mirror in the shower and a sink. All the touches that I put into my same home with attention to detail as if I was going to move into the house. We sold the home in 2 days after an open house. We had 4 offers on the home, and I accepted not the highest offer, but I accepted the offer from the best family. And that family is enjoying that home today, and I feel good about it. 4 weeks after that, I wasn't feeling well. I didn't know. I thought maybe it was a cold or something. I always say on the happy scale that they show you at the doctors, where you can be a 1 and you're smiling, and you can be a 10 where you have the most agonizing pain you've ever had, I was maybe a 1 or 2. But something in my inner voice told me, you should go to the ER. People ignore stuff when they're sick and they don't go to the ER. I was sitting in the waiting room thinking what an idiot I was for going to the ER for a common cold. Eventually they took me into CAT scan. As soon as they wheeled me out of CAT scan, the doctor came up, the surgeon came up, and he said, you're going into the OR right now, your appendix has ruptured. I spent about 2 weeks in the hospital on antibiotic drugs, and that's when I faced the fact that I very well could have died. In fact, the doctors told me had I laid down for a nap and I'd come in later in the day, I probably would have had a totally different outcome. 4 weeks after that, my mother-in-law died. My mother-in-law was the most special person to me on the planet. I couldn't say enough things about her. I came back to Connecticut so that my daughter and wife could attend the services in Wisconsin, where they were from. My daughter texted me a couple pictures of my wife while they were in Wisconsin. I called my daughter and I said, what's wrong with her? And they said, she's just depressed, she's tired, it's all a lot for her to take, she's been missing you. One day that inner voice went off on me again. And I asked my wife, when's your next doctor's appointment? She said, well, I just had a blood draw 4 days ago. I'm supposed to go in about 2 weeks. And I said to her, no, we're not going in 2 weeks. You're going today. I'm taking you to the ER. I took my wife to the ER and they did another blood draw, and they looked at the blood work and they said, why hasn't she been in here months and months ago? Because her blood work shows that her kidney was declining and now it's totally failing. They said if you would have waited 24 hours, your wife would have not probably made it to the ER. My wife went on dialysis and she was really declining under it. She had a surgery about every week for 10 weeks trying to get a port placed where it didn't get infected or it would work or they could do the dialysis off of it. And it was hard on her. and I remained supportive to her. About the same time, our daughter was sick. I took my daughter to the ER, and our daughter was diagnosed in end-stage liver failure. Our daughter's liver failure was a complication created by, frankly, bullying and the fact that she had bariatric surgery to lose weight, as I did. I used to be well over 300 pounds. I knew my wife was going to die. I was certain that she was so bad, and I was watching her decline in front of my eyes. It never dawned on me that our daughter was going to die. As it worked out, our daughter Sarah died September 25th of 2017 from liver failure. I just couldn't save her. But I knew I could save my wife. I was insistent that I was going to be an organ donor for my wife and donate my kidney. They told me it wasn't that easy, that about 80% of the people can't pass the qualifications, that the most important thing is that I'm not sick and that I have nothing wrong with me. I went through countless and endless tests to ensure that my heart was good, that my blood was good, my sugar levels were fine, I could have nothing wrong with me. Didn't change my opinion I was going to donate my kidney. By chance, I happened to be a match for my wife, which was a great thing. January 10th of 2018, my wife received my kidney, and today she's doing absolutely wonderful. But that also puts her in the at-risk category. She is older, and she also is on immune suppression medication to make sure that she doesn't reject the kidney. So I'm taking those extra protocols, and I'm following the requirements that were recommended by the Hartford Hospital transplant team, people that I highly respect for both their opinions and their medical abilities. And that's when I started making a mask that my wife could wear, and I wanted to make it available to all of the public. Everybody was saying early on, masks don't work, masks don't help, you don't need a mask. And then they went on to facial coverings, wrap a scarf around. I'm a safety person. To me, wrapping a scarf around, it's what kind of scarf? Do I use like a knitted one from Harry Potter? Do I use a winter one? Do I use Gucci? What scarf do you mean? What bandana? That's not scientific in any way, shape, or form. What material is it made out of? And as far as these disposable masks, they're a health concern. And I'm extremely concerned when I see people wearing them day after day. They're meant to be thrown away. They're not meant to breathe your bacteria into them. They're not meant to have things that you're protecting yourself gather on the outside of them, be hung up on a door or flung in your car or set on your counter. It's just a spreading place for bacteria. And our hospitals and first responders need those. So I started well before I launched the site, talking to the state, trying to get somebody to listen to me. I'm tenacious. I don't give up. I don't give up on other people. I've said through this process, I'm like a weeble. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Well, I'll tell you what, I got weebled down a lot of times, but every day I went home, I got my brain back together, I got my thinking back together, and I pushed forward with the mission. I pushed forward with the same determination as I would saving my wife, just like I sold that house where I wanted it to be another family to be raised in it. Everybody out there I consider to be my family, my friend, a member of my community. I've learned what it feels like to lose a child. I know what it feels like to lose a parent. I know what it feels like to need to take care of a parent. I know what it's like to have responsibility. And that's what I bring with MaskForCitizens.com.